those of you who are not a member of the Superwoman Circle, it's such a great month to join. We are talking about the thyroid. So I don't know if you've got Hashimoto's or thyroid disorders, or you know someone who does, but we're focusing on thyroid health and all the different nuances of that. At the same time, also trying to bring in the theme of February, which usually is Heart Health Month. So really talking about cardiovascular health and heart health and how it pertains to women, but also to men as well. As many of you know, Vic has a cardiovascular issue, had a heart attack back in 2019. So understanding all the implications of heart disease and cholesterol and all these different things becomes really important for our family. So all of that's going on this month in the circle. Remember that we do our coaching session, group coaching once a month as well. And in that, people will bring their questions and share ideas, everything from a beauty hack to recipes to what works for them. So all exciting stuff. So I encourage you guys to join. I am going to take your questions in just a minute. I already see questions coming up, which is so exciting. But I wanted to take a second to talk about what caught my eye this week. So we had a couple of things. So first of all, again, Ozempic is all over everything. I feel like I open up my news feed and I see something or the other about Ozempic. Everyone talking about these medications and how they're impacting weight and weight loss. And I think it's interesting, and I do think for people who've truly suffered from obesity and who have already tried the diet, exercise approach, and it hasn't worked for them, and they have a significant amount of weight to lose, these medications almost offer hope. There's a study that came out talking about how essentially obesity is a disease, and if we think about it as a disease and not as something that someone did wrong, right? That they had a bunch of bad habits, therefore that's why they are the way they are, then I think we start to change the lens through which we view true obesity. And true obesity, let's talk about that for a second, is really defined by having a BMI over 30, so that's your weight against your height, or having a very high body fat percentage. So you've got to look at it through a medical lens and understand who's obese and who's not. Now, in practice, we get a lot of people that are not obese, but they're overweight or pre-diabetic. So they're in the early phases of that. And what that means for them is that they're starting to see weight gain, body fat, visceral fat go up, but they're not yet in that irreversible place. That's what's happening to these folks that are obese. They're getting to the point where it almost feels like what it takes to lose weight is so heroic and takes so long that it becomes demotivating, right? So they start a diet or they start an exercise plan, but it takes so long to see any kind of result that they fall off of it very quickly. So that's where these medications have a place. But before we go into that, and if you're not in that population of having a BMI over 30, then you really do want to think about the foundations of weight loss. And so that's gut health, hormone health, your liver health, blood sugar regulation, blood sugar hacking that many people are getting into and doing now, which is, I think, kind of exciting because it's really educating us as to what we're doing in our daily habits. And what we're learning is that it is really the moment-to-moment habits that are determining what is going on with our metabolism and with weight in particular. And I think that is the message that's not getting across, that this conversation or this sort of condition shifts with moment-to-moment decisions, but once you cross a certain line, it becomes very difficult and you lose the motivation to make those decisions. Why am I saying that? I want to talk again about this metabolism testing. So this test in particular is very much looking at a couple of different things. It's looking at how much energy that you are expending sitting around. So while we're talking here, while I'm interacting with you guys, how much energy am I burning? And so it's a different number for everybody. But if we go back to mine, my energy expenditure was roughly about 2,000, give or take, calories a day. So that's me sitting around chit-chatting with you. Around 2,000 calories a day is what I'm burning. Now, my resting energy is even lower than that, right? Because the total is taking into account my lifestyle. My resting energy was only at about 1,700 calories. So that means this will spit all this stuff out. So that means for weight loss, I have to go even lower. I have to go to around 1,300 calories a day. And here's the problem. When you get to 1,000 to 1,300 calories a day, you can't get the protein in, you can't get your fat grams in, you can't get your fiber or your micronutrients in, and so you keep shifting lower and lower and lower when it comes to metabolic rates. And then what happens with that is this total energy number gets lower too. So it's kind of like this downward spiral. And so most doctors and most weight loss places will say, well, it's calories in, calories out, right? So if you take in this much, this is how much you burn. But what about somebody like me, where my caloric load needs to go down to 1,000 to 1,200 or so calories a day? This is not realistic, and it's not realistic for maintaining muscle mass. It's not realistic for hormone balance and for energy. And I think this very conversation is what's driving everybody insane when it comes to weight loss. So what we do need to be focused on, and I saw one question pop up. Yes, we do have this testing at Center Spring. We are offering it. It is included in your new patients, or it's an add-on if you're coming in for one of your follow-ups. You just need to ask for it. But what we do need to work on, and where this is helpful, is increasing the total energy output, so this bottom number on this report, and increasing your resting energy. And you increase those by making the gut more efficient, balancing hormones, hydrating, drinking, and I think I'm behind already today, but drinking about, again, a solid 64 to 100 ounces of water a day, and getting very deep, consistent sleep, around 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. Those are the things that make a difference when it comes to your resting energy expenditure and your total energy expenditure. The next thing on this report that makes a difference is your lifestyle. So me scooting around on this thing, I'm not sure what that's doing in comparison to before, because I didn't have this test before. In some ways, I almost think my micro movement, like my moment to moment movement, is increased compared to where it was previously, where I was sitting constantly. So it's all about remembering to get up and move throughout your day, move consistently, move frequently, because look at the next number on here. Exercise only gives you about 100 to 200 extra calories. That's it. So everybody out there slaving in gyms and with trainers and doing all this heroic stuff, you're not really adding that much more to your ability or to your resting energy expenditure. You're adding some, and you're building muscle. So if you're focused on building muscle, that's working. But everything else is not doing a lot to your resting energy expenditure, and so again, is not ultimately really targeting this whole conversation around weight loss. So what do? I think building muscle is important, but the new studies on building muscle really talk about 10 to 15 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week. It's not the heroic 1-hour workouts. The classes are fun and we all love them, but that's not what is going to move the needle long term, especially if you've got gut issues, hormone issues, and inflammation. So I think micro movements throughout the day, doubling up on your workouts, so maybe they need to be 10 and 10 or 20 and 20 or 30 and 30, so that you have more movement throughout the day, hydrating, sleeping consistently, and again, getting these microbial, like the gut component and your hormone levels checked, so we understand what's happening there. I feel like those are the things that ultimately are going to make the biggest difference. Okay, so I think we've got questions pouring in, so I'm going to start taking questions. Let's take the ones on this test first. And before we go into the questions on metabolism, just a quick reminder, I know there's a lot going on. I started talking about Ozempic and Wegovy and those medications. There is a place for them, but there's a place for them after you've laid this foundation, and especially if you have this super high BMI. Otherwise, what I'm concerned about is we're seeing the yo-yo, where people are losing the weight but gaining the weight because they don't have this foundation and they're just yo-yoing back and forth. So the practice, when we are prescribing the medications, we're doing it kind of on a bell curve, where we'll do low doses, we'll ramp up, we'll plateau, and then we'll ramp back down. Hopefully on the ramp back down, you don't start to gain a bunch of weight. So I hope that makes sense when it comes to how we're thinking about these different medications. And how we are dealing with metabolic health, sort of related, but not directly. There was another study that caught my eye, and we'll dive into that more for sure over the weekend and next week, talking about sugar and the risk of ovarian cancer, and how ultra-processed foods, again, we're seeing this for every cancer, quite honestly, but how ultra-processed foods ultimately are really driving cancer risk. So again, as we put all these pieces together, if you're like, okay, where do I start? Drink your water, lose the sugar, eat at regular intervals, up the protein, and get a good night's sleep. And I would start there and see how much progress you can make around this a sort of weight and metabolism question. Okay, let's take some questions around metabolism first, and then I think I saw some thyroid questions. We'll take those next. All right, let's jump in.
Okay, let's see. So, like you mentioned, someone mentioned, do you run this metabolic test at your clinic?
Yes, we do. We do run. This is metabolic testing. We're doing it at Center Spring MD. It's been so educational and enlightening for all of us, for sure.
Okay. And someone asked, how often do you retest? Is it blood work or different type of tests?
This is not a blood test. This is literally you're breathing into a machine and they're measuring kind of like your carbon dioxide levels. So it takes about 10 minutes or so to get done. So we probably retest it. I mean, again, this is brand new. I think we're going to probably retest it every 90 days. I think retesting it more frequently than that, I don't know how helpful that'll be because it takes time to see changes that you make. So my thought is every 3 months.
Okay. And someone asked, can metformin help with weight loss?
It helps, it does, So it helps with blood sugar control. So it brings blood sugar management down. So for some people, they'll see the payoff with weight loss. The majority of people are not saying they see a lot of weight loss necessarily with metformin.
Okay. Someone mentioned, have you heard of the 75 hard challenge? I started it and I feel exhausted after doing 2 45-minute workouts.
I don't know that one. We'll have to look that up. There's always a new, I feel like there's always a new fitness trend, diet trend, all these other things. But hopefully what this testing is showing you is that that's only going to make so much of a dent in your overall health if you're worried about weight. And if you're feeling tired, I would question, like, hopefully you're sleeping well, eating enough protein. If you're not doing that, then you're just burning out your adrenals if you're doing a workout that you can't recover from.
I think those are all the
metabolism questions.
ones.
Okay. Is this an interesting topic for you guys? I mean, this is one we can keep diving into. I'm just fascinated by it because we keep getting requests for Wegovy and Ozempic and Moderna, and I keep seeing it in the news over and over again. And again, we keep hearing that weight loss is something so many people are striving for and still struggling with. Okay, thyroid, we are attacking in the Superwoman Circle this month. We have the coaching schedule planned, and I believe the webinar, I can't remember the date. We'll post the date. I think it's next week or the week after, where we dig into all things thyroid. So, but we can take a few questions now. Let's take some of those while we're here.
Sure. Someone asked, what veggies can't you eat when you have hypothyroid?
What veggies? So we worry about what we call goitrogenic vegetables, which are usually the ones in the cruciferous family. But again, it's not that you can not eat them. That's not the point. But you just don't want to be eating them 5 to 6 times a day. So you can have them like, you can have a serving a day and it probably wouldn't affect your thyroid. But those, again, to remind everyone, that's broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts. I'm probably missing one. Broccoli, kale, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. Those are the ones that come to mind. Bok choy is one. But those are all cruciferous vegetables. So they help with estrogen metabolism, but too much of it. And I haven't honestly, for all that's written about that, I've only had a few cases. Remember, I've been seeing patients for over 15 years. And out of all the patients we've seen, I've maybe seen 3 times where someone's eaten so many of those so many of those vegetables that it crashed their thyroid. So I think as long as you're being smart about it and varying your food, which is really what we should be doing regardless, right? Varying food in general, because that gives us different micronutrients, different levels of antioxidants, all that other stuff, then I don't think it's going to be an issue.
Okay, let's see. Someone asked, THS 6.39 thyroglobulin antibodies 3, is it too high?
Okay, a TSH of 6.9 is high, absolutely high. Most people feel good around a TSH of 1 to 2. Once that TSH starts getting past 4, most of my patients, and again, everyone's got their own story, so definitely don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. But most of my patients feel good at that TSH of 1 to 2, and once we're going over 4, you're very hypothyroid. So the higher that TSH is, the more hypothyroid you are. The thyroid antibodies that you guys are mentioning don't sound that bad. Usually I say they're positive when they start to go over like 50, 60, 70, somewhere in that range. So definitely hypothyroid, maybe not Hashimoto's necessarily.
Do you think everyone who has positive antibodies needs to be on thyroid medication, even if TSH, T3, T4 are normal?
Say that for me one more time.
Do you think everyone who has positive antibodies needs to be on?
Got it. Okay. So the question is, antibodies are high, but thyroid function is normal. No, you don't. You have Hashimoto's or Graves', one of these autoimmune thyroid conditions, but you don't necessarily need to be on medication if thyroid function is normal. However, you do need to work harder on an anti-inflammatory plan. That means lowering foods that are inflammatory, sleeping consistently to get cortisol levels lower, because that's going to help the inflammation in the thyroid. So that means maybe going gluten-free, lowering dairy, lowering sugar, lowering alcohol, but then adding in natural anti-inflammatory. So I like adding in things like omega-3s or even curcumin or some of these type of things to help with lowering the inflammation. One of my favorite kind of old remedies is to do castor oil with a little bit of frankincense in it and rubbing it directly on the thyroid as well, or even taking apple cider vinegar. Those are more like old remedies or home remedy type things, but those can help to lower the antibody load over time. For our tougher patients, again, we'll do a lot more. We'll get a little bit deeper and do things like LDN or glutathione or those type of things to lower the antibody load. But that antibody load, I mean, I think that's a really great point. That antibody load needs to be tracked because it is a sign of inflammation and overall autoimmunity in the body.
Okay. Is TSH and thyroglobulin antibodies enough to determine thyroid numbers, or do I need more detailed panel?
So I think, to me, a proper thyroid lab is TSH, free T4, free and total T4, free and total T3, thyroid antibodies, and let's see, TSH, T4. Yeah, those are the main ones. Sometimes you can throw in an RT3 too to see how stressed the body is, but that's really what's going to give you a better overall picture of kind of what's happening there.
All right. And we have another question. When trying to conceive and struggling with Hashimoto's, what would be ideal? TSH? Question mark.
Okay, so if you have Hashimoto's and you're trying to conceive, you need to look at the whole picture. You need to know where your TSH is, you need to know where your thyroid antibodies are, and then you need to look at T4 and T3 to make sure your body's actually using any thyroid replacement, that you're giving it effectively. So again, I don't think we can take shortcuts during pregnancy, and remember, pregnancy will change the thyroid. So women's thyroid numbers will shift, like trimester 1 to trimester 2 to delivery, and then definitely shift again postpartum. So I think it's really important to kind of check it across the board.
All right.
Ooh, this is a good one. Can I answer this question I see pop up? I get asked this all the time in practice. If you are diagnosed with hypothyroidism, do you take thyroid medications for your whole life? So I hear a lot of, I don't want to start thyroid medications because I'm going to have to take it forever. That's simply not true. I don't know where that's coming from. If you are over-medicated and you haven't done the work to support the thyroid, then yes, you may have to take it forever. But as you clean up the gut and clean up the liver and balance out your nutrients, many times our patients at least at Center Spring, need fewer and fewer or less and less thyroid medication. So you're not necessarily on something for life. And we actually do have patients that have come off of thyroid medications over time.
This question's from TikTok. Someone asked, what are your thoughts on beet powder?
I like beet powder for cardiovascular health. It seems to open up blood vessels and it's a great source of iron. I'm not a beet powder person for thyroid health necessarily, but for heart health, yes.
Okay, and from YouTube, Holly asks, are you going to publish this live? Someone I know needs this.
Oh, wow. So I usually put the lives sort of in the subscription area, so they are more than welcome to have access to it there, but we usually do publish it there for sure. We get everybody's questions in. Why not beet powder for thyroid? It's just not my first pick. for balancing thyroid function. Definitely helps circulation, definitely helps the blood flow, but not my first pick for an inflamed thyroid or for thyroid function in general. I like iodine. Selenium is a good one too. That's a great one for thyroid function. But that's usually, and magnesium, that's usually where I'll start. So.
Someone said, can you please elaborate on what you said about thyroid medication? Can you come off it in a few months or after your levels are better?
So thyroid medication, most people can't come off in a few months. Coming off thyroid medication is more about cleaning up the gut, doing the gut work, and balancing your other hormones so that you'll need less and less over time. Now you need less and less is when you're starting to get hyper with a dose of thyroid medication that you started with. So maybe, for example, 50 micrograms of Synthroid worked for you, but all of a sudden you're starting to get hyper symptoms because you're doing all this other diet cleanup, gut cleanup, liver cleanup. Now 50 is too much. We have to drop to 25. And then if that keeps happening, that over time can help, people end up getting on less and less and less medication. So coming completely off, I've had a handful of patients do that. Most are able to lower, but a little bit harder to come completely off.
Okay, another question from TikTok. I was told iodine was not good for your thyroid.
Iodine helps your thyroid, especially if you're iodine deficient, but there's a sweet spot because too much of it can make you hyper. Those of you that have goiters or nodules, oftentimes you have a thyroid deficiency. You can test for it. You have to test a urinary iodine level.
Holly also asked, what about removing heavy metals or toxins?
Such a good point. Yeah. So thyroid, the reason Hashimoto's begins with to start, and that's a whole conversation. We'll get into this in the circle for sure. There are genetics associated with Hashimoto's, but those same genetics lend themselves to storage of heavy metals. So it's a methylation issue. So many people will have issues with heavy metals that then turns into Hashimoto's. Those same people often have candida as well. So definitely a relationship there for sure. But that gets into a lot of science, really complicated. So I would recommend joining the circle so that we could go into that depth essentially of information. All right, let's do one more and then we're gonna wrap for today. Anything else in there?
We did get one question.
By the way, I'm seeing a comment on TikTok where someone, I hope you're doing well, by the way, but someone cut sugar and carbs and they were able to reduce their medications twice. That's exactly what I've seen for sure. And by the way, did you guys know Synthroid and levothyroxine both have gluten in them? So if you're having problems with either of those medications and you're gluten sensitive, that could be the issue. Tyrosint is actually gluten-free, so just keep that in mind as well.
Someone asked, what should I do for low progesterone?
Low progesterone. All right, this will be our last one. Low progesterone is related to that hormone level falling, and for me it fell in my 20s, quite honestly, so I don't even think we can say it's an age thing. But first of all, you need a lot of good healthy fat to boost any sort of internal progesterone production you have. So I would say make sure you're getting a tablespoon of olive oil, you're getting in a little bit of ghee or nut butters. We need the fat to help produce hormones. So that would probably be my first point. The second is there are a lot of great herbs that help up progesterone levels. So chaste tree is one of them. There's a Chinese herbal formula that does as well. And then bioidentical progesterone is something we've used to replace progesterone as well. All right, that thyroid medication is Tirosint, Tirosint. But again, it becomes an insurance game, at least here in the States, because some folks cover it and some do not. All right, lots of great questions. I think we got almost everybody's questions in. So thank you for joining me. We'll be back to our Tuesday lives again. And if there's a topic you want to cover, just let me know. And for everybody else, maybe I'll see you in the Superwoman Circle. The link's in my bio. And we will dig into all things thyroid. All right, take care, guys.